You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, a couple weeks ago, we did an episode where we were talking about sales presentations.
Yes.
So we've both had sales presentations on the mind for a few weeks now. And then earlier today, before we recorded this podcast, you were doing a webinar. Mm-hmm. And during that webinar, the subject of the webinar was sales presentations. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And then during this webinar, you asked the participants a question. You took a poll. You asked them a question. What was that question?
It's a question that I came up with very recently, and I just wanted to pick their brains on that. And the question was, what is one thing you would like to improve in yourself regarding sales presentations?
Ooh. What is one thing you would like to improve about yourself? So yeah. What did they say?
Well, there were about 250 participants. A little more than half of them participated in the poll. Oh. And the poll is like one of those word cloud generators. So there's a dialog box and you can only enter one response. It can be a couple of words, but it's just like one time you enter something. And then the graphic is generated and the most popular, let's say, or the most used word comes up in the middle, like in bold giant letters.
Okay.
It was very interesting because it took maybe 30, 40 seconds for the participants to write their responses. Mm-hmm. But I noticed that from the beginning, the word self-confidence took a comfortable spot right in the center.
Wow.
It just grew bigger and bigger. And the cloud grew as well because there were so many words around it. Uh-huh. But self-confidence just looked at me right from the beginning, and it was so confident in the place that it was taking at the center of the cloud. And after...
So the word self-confidence was being self-confident about...
It was very self-confident about his position, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it just stayed there for the rest of the poll. Well, it was like 60 seconds, the whole thing, but it never blinked. It never even doubted itself. It just entered the stage from the first second and stayed there very confidently, yeah.
So you've got a bunch of people who are telling you on this webinar that their biggest concern is self-confidence during the sales presentation.
The biggest improvement that they would want to make.
So what did you tell them at that point?
Well, my first reaction was wow, but at the same time I wasn't surprised because just like in other presentation situations, sales presentations can be intimidating as well. And I understand that, being good at it, being confident at it is key to be successful and close deals.
Sure.
But I think the first thing I mentioned was the understanding that this is not something that we're born with.
Okay.
And by the way, I said that with a disclaimer. I'm not a scientist. I'm not in a position to make absolute claims about what we are born with and what not. But sure. From my personal perspective, I mentioned that I think this is something that this is not something that we're born with, like presentation skills, by the way.
Okay.
But something that we achieve through time, through practice, and through repetition. Those were the first things that I talked about. Of course, then we went into more detail about, okay, we understand that it's not something we're born with. We understand that it's something that we do over time, we gain over time. So how do we do that? We talked about it as well. And today we can talk about them as well. But sure. that was my first reaction.
Okay. One thing that strikes me about what you just said is that you mentioned that practice is one of the factors in increasing self-confidence. And I'm wondering, because practice ad infinitum is one of the things that I also do with my clients. And we practice their presentations over and over and over until the client is practically sick of the presentation with the express purpose of increasing exactly that, the self-confidence during the delivery. Is that what you mean?
Yes and no. Mm-hmm. Yes, in the sense that I believe practice eventually makes perfect, and we don't even need to achieve for perfection. We don't need to aim for perfection. And no, in the sense that I think it's important to make sure from the beginning that you're practicing the right things.
Okay.
I mean, what
Practicing
if
the
you're,
right things.
for example, in the webinar, we also talked about changing the perspective of sales presentations from a me-oriented, like my company, my products, my references, my stuff oriented presentations to client-oriented presentations, like the things that they want to achieve in their lives, how my products and services can help them get from point A to point B. So if I keep practicing the first one, my products, my presentation, my opening and everything, then yes, I will have more confidence in those areas, but it's not going to work out because I think that would be the wrong way to approach a sales presentation. So I think the first step would be, before practicing diligently, would be choosing the avenue for practicing and go through there.
Choosing the avenue for practicing. What do you mean by that?
So yes, I understand that, the confidence will eventually stem from knowledge, you knowing your stuff, you knowing your topic and everything. But also I think it's crucial to invest time to understand the audience, like their needs, their preferences, their pain points. Those actually will be my guiding lights in coming up with the content that I will be sharing in that sales presentation.
Okay. So, but let's get back to your webinar today. When these people ask this question, how do we increase our self-confidence during the sales presentations? What other advice did you give to these people?
I gave one of the advices that I wish I had known at the time when I was suffering from a lack of self-confidence, and it was, I had difficulty with embracing rejection as a natural part of the sales process, because I used to go out there when I was doing active sales. I used to go out there with the idea that, okay, I'm going to meet 3 clients today. I need to make 3 sales.
Yeah.
I had absolutely no idea that rejection was an inevitable and crucial part of the whole sales process. True. But through practice and to trial and error, let's say, I think it is possible to see this process of rejection as a chance for growth and development. And in return, it helps with your self-confidence. I'm not saying that there will be a point where you will have absolutely 0 rejection. I don't think that will ever happen, because God knows what people are going to reject you for. But I think we can learn from each setback, get back to the office, analyze what went wrong, what didn't work. Did I fail to make a connection? Did I fail to convey the value? Did I fail, for example, to build credibility or trust? And after such analysis, let's say, I think we will be able to make the necessary adjustments.
Okay.
And by the way, in this regard, I would like to give a shout out to Frank Underwood from the House of Cards, one of my favorite characters. I mean, I didn't talk about him in the webinar, but come to think of it, I should. One of my favorite quotes that he said in the show was, "You cannot get from a no to a yes without a maybe in between."
Yeah.
So the way I saw it, every no back then should be a yes, and it should be quick. But now I realize, hey, there is a maybe in between to start with. Mm-hmm. And even to that, we may not be able to get to, but it's okay. This is a continuous learning process. Okay. It's not just from one day to the next, we're going to become very confident. We're going to embrace rejection like we have never done it before. No, it took me years, literally years, if not a decade to do that. So
yeah.
Well, I'm not the most intelligent person, so other people can make it faster, but I don't think it's going to be like in a matter of a week. We need more time than that.
Let's talk slide design for a moment. In the first slides that people tend to take into a sales presentation will be often, this is our product and this is who we are.
Oh yeah.
We've both seen a lot of that. This is our product and this is who we are. And actually not always in the order. Sometimes it's this is who we are first. So
yes, about us.
Yes, about us. So tell me what you think.
We were established in 1979 in some states, covering like so many square meters.
So if I'm a sales manager and I'm looking at the slide deck that I'm sending my sales force out there with, and the first slides in the slide deck are About Us slides. What
Yeah.
would you suggest putting in there instead?
That's a good question. I would definitely recommend not starting the presentation about me, but starting it with about them.
Okay.
And by the way, that would require a lot of work because now we're not talking about a one size fits all company presentation that I can take to every single client meeting that I'm going to have. No, we're talking about like 80% of the presentation staying intact throughout different client visits, but maybe different openings for each client. And I'm not talking about only putting their logo to the title slide. No.
Okay.
I'm talking about starting the presentation, at least starting the conversation with what it is that they want to achieve. What is it that they want to end up with their business, with their position, with whatever it is that I can help them with. So at that point, I mean, in the initial stages, I don't believe the client will be too interested in your history, your milestones, even your team.
Okay.
But I think, I mean, you know how I like saying that we're selfish creatures, especially as presentation audiences. It's always like me. Hey, talk about me. Talk about me. Well, talk about them. If that's the case, well, why do I say that? Because if I'm making the sales presentation to you as my potential client, then I believe you have more power over the conversation. I believe I need you more than you need me. Well, you may be needing my product and you may not even be aware of it, but we're not at that point yet. We're at the point where I am in a position that I'm making the sales presentation to you. So I need to cater to your needs. It's not my information that should be in the opening. It should be your needs, your desires, as Blair Enns likes to put it on the Win Without Pitching, your desired future state.
Okay.
What is it that you want to be? And how can my products or services help you with that? Let's start talking about that. And then we will talk about maybe my milestones. Maybe. I doubt that.
Yeah. So you might go through your entire initial sales meeting and never get to the About Us section. It might be
Absolutely.
There. Yeah. So it might be there buried in your slide deck somewhere, but it's not the foot that you lead with.
Absolutely. And if we ever come to that, I would recommend not showing a slide about us. I would actually maybe hit the B key, black out the slides, turn off the computer, whatever, look people in the eye and talk about your company. Tell them your company, tell them your milestones.
Good idea.
Don't show me like 5 circles in a row showing step 1, step 2, step 3. No, tell me about your company.
That's a good point. And if I had $1 for every time I saw those 5 circles, I would be a rich man.
We would not be doing this podcast, but sipping margaritas on some Caribbean beach or something.
We would be sipping margaritas brought to us by our staff help.
Yes.
On our yacht.
Yeah. Yes.
All right.
Until then, no more About Us slides. Until that happens.
Yeah, until that happens. All right. So we're about out of time today. So thank you very much, Alper. And
thank you.
I will talk to you next week then.
Thank you. And by the way, I'm sure this is something that we will keep digging in.
Yeah.
It just deserves so much to be talked about.
Yeah. And in fact, we've kind of touched on this subject a little bit before. Not only were we talking just a couple weeks ago about sales presentations, but we've also talked about nonlinear presentations, exactly the kind of presentation that would allow you to take this About Us section and just sink it in the back of the presentation, knowing that you might never even get to it. So we've touched on this subject many times.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll come back to that as well.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Alper.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.